we're trying to achieve now. So as it's been said before, actually, I started out as a scientist. I was researching biophysics in the past. I have a PhD in biophysics. I did basically DNA cancer-related research. And after that, I decided to move into the world of finance, which is how I ended up being in HEC and graduated as an international finance student, and then joined a consultancy, which was a European consultancy, which made me travel quite a lot. And for one of our clients, I actually had to travel to China. And the job was basically to try and harmonize processes in this company all over the world. And one of the factories were in China, which is how I ended up being in China. I didn't know much about China at the time, and it was in Suzhou. When I arrived, I was absolutely blown away by what I saw. I thought that the factory that I saw in China was very, very impressive. I thought that the people in charge of it were extremely sophisticated. And I thought that it was a place in the world where fascinating things were happening, and I wanted to be a part of it. So as I came back to France after that trip, I quit my job and I decided to go for a summer school in Beijing to study Chinese at Tsinghua University for a few months and try and take the temperature of what really was happening. I loved it so much that I decided to stay, and I joined an investment fund, which role was to help European tech companies to enter the Chinese market. And as I was doing that, I quickly realized that the number of startups and tech companies that were popping up in China was very, very big. It was accelerating very quickly. And the only way to try and understand it was to use data, try and figure out how to read the internet to try and see which companies were created, which ones were raising money, why, how much, from whom, all these kind of questions. And as I was doing that, I actually met my co-founder, whose name is Maxim. He was also living in Beijing at the time. He was head of an investment bank in Beijing. And he was working on very big transactions between Europe and Asia, and specifically China. And he saw the same kind of dynamic, which was that many things that were happening in the tech world, and I would say innovation world, were very relevant to bigger companies. So we basically decided that this was something that we wanted to try and solve, and especially as a cross-border question, because as it happens, people outside of China usually don't realize what is happening in China. And we thought China is one of the biggest innovation ecosystem in the world. It is really going very, very quickly. And the technologies that are developed in China are really cutting edge. And most people don't realize that. And actually, when I was helping these companies enter the Chinese market, when they arrived in China, they were blown away by what was just the norm, like using your phone to pay for things. And so we thought, is there a way we could try and create a bridge which would be at a level where we really understand what is happening in China, and also make it available to people who don't really know about China? And so we decided to team up and do that. We came back to Europe to try and really talk to people who we thought needed to understand the Chinese market better, to try and see what really they needed to see. And we started out actually as a combination between a tech company and a consulting company. So that means that we developed algorithms that were, I would say, crawling the internet, all in Chinese. Everything we've developed were in Chinese. All of our algorithms are in Chinese. And we tried to map the entire ecosystem in China and then make it available in English in a way that would answer the problems that they had. So we serviced clients like that who were thinking about going to China, investing maybe in China. And as we were doing this, what we realized is that we were able to create a product. And so this company, we started it at the beginning of 2019, so early last year. And after about 6 or 7 months, we decided to launch a public search engine. which is something I'll be very happy to show you maybe a bit later, where we try to create a product that would be scalable and that would be something that reads the internet every day in order to see what is happening dynamically, live or almost live, so that people would also realize that things are changing very, very quickly, but also allow them to find companies without knowing what they are. Because for many people, they have no idea how many companies are doing AI, for example, or blockchain or fintech or anything like that. And they don't know how to look at them, especially when the famous ones are taking all the space in the media. And so we were servicing a lot of investors. And so what we did is we decided to build an algorithm that would rank these companies. So just to explain quickly what a search engine is, it's basically something where you need to be able to search, and then you need to be able to have results that are ranked. So that means that if you use Google, Baidu, or Naver in South Korea, you will have results which are how well the websites match your input criteria. But if you're looking for companies, that doesn't make sense, because if I search AI, I don't want to just find companies who are matching AI in their website, because that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for interesting companies in AI. So we built a specific algorithm, which is, you could see it as mimicking what stock prices are for public corporate, or what valuation could be, and do that for private companies. So that means that if you go on our search engine, which I'll show you, you type AI or you look at unicorns, the ones who will be ranked on top are the companies that investors think are the most promising. So that's what we've done. And this is something which is allowing anybody to understand ecosystems that is otherwise unavailable if you don't speak the language. Because the reality is, in order to really understand the Chinese ecosystem, you need to speak Chinese. You need to be able to read Chinese. Otherwise, if you look at the media in English, it's not going to be comprehensive. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to solve that problem. So it's a cross-border business, as in we have to have algorithms and data that is at the level of what someone who's Chinese and speaks Chinese would like to find. And then we need to make it available for people who don't speak Chinese, which creates translation is a very big question, because there is also questions around how culturally you will call things. For example, if you were to translate directly high tech using the Chinese words, you will end up seeing black tech, which nobody's going to search in outside of China. So that means we had to build algorithms which were taking this into account. And of course, to do that, you have to have the experience of living in China, people who are fluent in Chinese. So we all kind of speak Chinese in the company. And we also have actually an HEC alumni who's also Chinese working with us. She's based in Beijing. My co-founder is based in London, and I'm currently based in Seoul. I'll tell you very shortly why I am in Seoul. But the idea was to really try and create a bridge where you are understanding an ecosystem locally and then making it available globally. And there's a lot of challenges to do that because, as I said, translation is an obvious one. But then, as you probably all know already, people have preconceptions on other countries and other cultures, which you often have to fight against. And being able to use data to do that is something that is very interesting, because when someone is looking at, so, you know, like something that people will say a lot is like Chinese companies are just copying what's happening in the US or in Europe. But that's because they don't know, they haven't seen. And when you're able to showcase to them the interesting companies that you can see or find in China in English, then they kind of start to realize, okay, actually, these companies are doing things that are very, very interesting, and they stand out. And then they think, okay, so maybe I don't really know all that's happening. When we started to pitch our company in Europe, we only had one slide, which I should have brought actually. So it was late 2018, early 2019. And we made just one slide where we listed all of the Chinese unicorns, and we had their name, the size of their name as a function of their valuation. And I went to see VCs in Europe and I said, okay, so you're experts in startups because that's what you're doing every day. Now, here is a slide of companies in China which are worth more than 1 billion, each of them. And there's hundreds of them. How many do you know? And we realized that even the VCs who were supposed to be experts, they actually knew maybe 2, 3, 5, 10 for the best, but they would never know the 100, and I think at the time it was 130 company. So that was kind of a very interesting thing to see. And so I would say that working cross-border, you really have to understand all sides so that you can be able to speak to people with words that they understand, while being able to telling them things which would be relevant to people on the other side, because otherwise you're losing a bit the perspective and you end up, you know, saying things which are not really relevant. And that's actually the reason why I now live in Seoul, because as our company grew, we decided that, so China is obviously one of the biggest innovation hubs in the world, but there are other places which are misunderstood. There are places like South Korea where innovation is actually happening at a very fast pace. But when you talk to people outside of South Korea, you realize that they only tell you about LG, Hyundai, and maybe Samsung. Where in reality, you have tens of thousands of innovative startups being created here and doing incredible things. And as I mentioned before, everything we did in China was also because we had the experience of China. We were living in China. We have Yonglan, who's, as I mentioned before, the HEC alumni, who's helping us really make sure that we don't make mistakes at understanding China. And in South Korea, we didn't have the same experience. And the only way we thought we would be able to achieve a level that was reliable enough for us was to actually make the move of going to South Korea and living there, because we actually arrived here through a competition organized by the Korean government, which was a 6-month competition, actually 3 + 3 months competition. And what you realize when you spend 3 to 6 months in a country which you didn't know before is how much you didn't know and how much you still don't know. So if we're to be a company who really understands ecosystems locally and make them available globally, then we must spend the time to really focus on ecosystems and understand them properly. And the only way you can do that is by being within those ecosystems. Because even though we're a data-based company, data isn't everything. And there's many, many things that you only understand while you're living in a place. So that's the reason why I now live in South Korea, because we're expanding our search engine to the South Korean market. It's been a year now that I live here, and I still feel like I have a lot to learn, very far from understanding the place and the culture and all the companies that exist, but starting to get into it. And I see, for example, so China is very well known for the fintech industry. And when I arrived in South Korea, everybody told me about a company called TOS, which is a fintech South Korean company. And at the beginning, I really wondered, so why is this company interesting? It's just an app which allows you to make easy payments. And so I thought, I'm not sure it's very innovative at first glance. But then when you live in South Korea and you realize how secured the payment systems are on your phone, it's really difficult to make a payment online in South Korea, actually. It's really, really difficult. They have a lot of layers because they want to be extra careful in every steps of the process. And this company TOS, where they're fascinating, is because they were able to create a system which is as simple for the user as any other fintech payment system, while complying with all of the very, very strict regulations that they have in South Korea. And then you realize that actually each ecosystem has specific characteristics, which means that the companies that are being created within them are equally interesting. And even if they do the same thing, the same end result, actually what they're building, what they're creating is very different sometimes. Another example, which I thought was fascinating. So I don't know if you know, but in South Korea, the regulation is based on what you can do. So any rule that exists in the country tells you what you can do. And so if something is not stated in the regulations, then you're not allowed to do it, which is counterintuitive with many systems. And there's a company which is called Tada, which I would say is the Didi of South Korea. But it was forbidden to do that in South Korea. And what they did is they were able to actually look at the regulation that said you have to have at least 6 people in a car to be allowed to transport them from point A to point B without being a taxi. And so this company decided to buy cars which were only more than 6 seats, and then became the equivalent of Didi. The only difference is the cars are bigger, and then you can rent them for 2 people, but actually the size of them is more. And that way they were able to operate. And that shows, I think, it's one of the biggest lessons that we learned being cross-border, is that each ecosystem is very specific and requires a lot of time to understand, and is worth trying to understand, because some things, it's like if you look at any kind of object from only one angle, you'll only see what your eyes see if you don't move. But then if you want to see more, you have to move and look from another angle, and then you're actually able to really see the object you're looking at. And I think that being a cross-border company allows us to do that, because we're faced with different ways of seeing the world, and we have to try and understand each of them to get the full picture of what we're trying to do. And so if we're talking about lessons, I think the biggest lesson that we learned is humility. It's just, you have to always be willing to learn and try and understand what you don't know, and never come to anything with preconceived answers which are based on what you think or how you've been educated. Because people in different countries see things very differently. And if you are willing to see that and to accept it, it's a strength that you can actually use to try and create more interesting things and more interesting products. And so that's basically the biggest lesson I would say I can think of. Of course, being a cross-border startups means that we work a lot remotely. So just, I didn't introduce the team, but except for Young and Maxim. So our team, we're currently 5 people. So 2 of them are located in the UK, 1 in China, in Beijing, and 2 in Seoul, South Korea. We are, in terms of nationalities, Scottish, British, French, Korean American, and Chinese. So that means that what we're trying to do as a company in terms of our products, we're also doing as a team, because we all come from different cultures, and we have to be able to work together and make sure we understand each other's. We also have very different backgrounds, which means that, so I gave you mine, which was a combination of science and then finance. But in the team, we have people who have been studying and worked in finance exclusively, people in computer sciences exclusively, and some people in science too. So it means that building these cross-border products, which is not only cross-border in terms of countries, but also cross-borders in terms of what it's doing. Because if you think about it, we're looking at startups using data in order to make it available for people who are in finance. And we're not actually only working with venture capitalists, we're also working with hedge funds or bigger corporates, because all of these startups, even if you don't want to acquire them, it's actually very important that you want to know what they do if you want to make sure that your existing investments in bigger corporates or you as a corporate will survive or will see the competition coming. You don't want to be Kodak, for example, where you have a very powerful and successful company, and because of an innovation that comes up, you suddenly just go bankrupt. And with the rate at which companies are created today, with the rate at which technology is evolving, this is a risk that is that has never been so true, because startups grow very, very quickly. If you take examples of companies like OFO in the past, came out of China, they, in a matter of a few years, were already in Europe. And even if they're not making a big impact because maybe they fail because it's a startup and they're not able to succeed in Europe, then you have other companies which will have seen what they've done and created something similar, like Lime, who was created as a, I believe, an answer to what OFO was in China, but for the US, and is now everywhere in Europe. When you go to Paris, you see everybody on scooters. And so if you are in the business of transportation, then this is something you want to try and see coming, because you don't want to be surprised. So that's why hedge funds and big corporates work with us. And so what that means is we're not only in the middle of cultures like China, Europe, US, and then South Korea now, we're also in the middle of different cultures in terms of how people see the world because of their actual activity. So if you're a hedge fund manager, you will see the world very differently compared to an entrepreneur who just started a year ago and just out of school. If you're a big corporate, you'll see the world very differently as if you're a VC fund. And so everything that I said around humility and being able to really listen, learn, and try to understand different cultures from different countries is also very, very true in terms of bridging different work culture together. And so I think that that's probably the biggest lessons. I think if I were to give another one, and again, I'm sure I'm going to miss a lot of things, but something that was very important to us as a company is, because we are from very different cultures, we live in different places, we have to be able to work efficiently while not being able to be in the same place. And even though today, and especially it's been getting a lot of noise with the current crisis, and what we're doing today, we can talk through Zoom or any other apps, and it's easy to see each other's. It's still very difficult to create the same kind of bond. And that for us was something that we were facing before the crisis. And the way we were able to still work together efficiently is through trust. I think that when you are working across countries and you are in a startup, which means you have to work very, like a lot, you have to work a lot, you have to react quickly, and you have to rely on people, because I said we're a team of 5, which is very small. So you need to be able to rely on everybody in the team. And that means you need to have a lot of trust. And I think that trust is something which is extremely important as a startup, company culture and trust, because you need to be able to know if someone isn't happy or if someone doesn't agree. And if there is no trust, then you might not know, because people will feel like they will not want to tell you something because they think maybe it's going to make you unhappy, or maybe they're not allowed to say something like that. And I strongly believe that as a company who has to work across border, creating a culture where everybody in the team feels comfortable to say anything at any time is very important. Something where if someone feels unwell, if someone has challenges that they face, they need to be able to say it, and the company needs to be able to accept that and help everybody. When coronavirus started, it was something that was in China only at the very beginning, and that meant that as a company we had to be empathic about people who were in China and had to face that crisis. And I remember we talked about that because we saw that at the time, the international media weren't always very empathic for people who were having this problem in China. And I think that this is something that's very important, that you're able to really want to understand what people are living through and make it part of your culture as a company, so that you don't create these unnecessary tensions, even if you don't live the same thing. Because when, imagine the coronavirus or the lockdown. So after it happened in China, then it happened in the UK, where it started to be easier elsewhere. In South Korea, for example, I didn't have a lockdown. So for me, I was not living through the same thing, because I like it was in China, or then after in Europe, I was not bound to stay in my apartment. I could walk anywhere I wanted, whenever I wanted to, which meant that even though I tried my very best to understand what people would feel, I was probably unable to really get it because I was not living it. So it was different. But because of trust, I was being very empathic, and I was really trying to, whatever people were telling me that was difficult or that they had to go through or to handle, it was something that was, the company would respect that and try and do everything to help. And I think that as a cross-border company, this is extremely important, because what's true for what I said about startups, ecosystems, and how they're built and how they work and why they work like that is also true for people, what they live. You need to respect, I don't know, just time zone is an obvious one, but we work across different time zones. So it means that we always want to talk when it's not always the easiest time for the other ones. And that means that you need to allow for people to, if we are in Asia and we work with the UK with a client until 3 a.m. and people are tired, then they can wake up whenever they want, because that's just, you need to understand that they're going through that because of the fact that we're a cross-border company. So you need to also accept that that comes with the other side of the coin. So I'm not sure if I have many more things to say. I think I would be very, very happy to actually have a discussion, hear what you guys think about all this. I think it's something that we really want to try and address as a company. We really want to, the way we see the world and the fact that things are happening in local ecosystems which are worth thinking about in a global context is something that is very important to us. We really genuinely believe that what's happening in China is fascinating. The companies are really, really interesting. So what we do now actually is we write a newsletter every week where we share in English everything that happened during the week or that we think is worth sharing in the context of that newsletter to people that are not aware of that. I usually also write an intro where I I give my own feel on what I was very interested in during the week. And then we give a list of all the things that we think you should really follow. And if there's something we learned from that, is that China is moving extremely, extremely quickly. And every week, it's difficult for us to make sure that we don't have a newsletter, which is a list of 1,000 of news. We of course use our algorithms to make it something which is which comes to us, but it's very important that we try and bridge the gaps that exist between countries and ecosystems, because there is a lot to learn from it. And companies who are being created locally are companies who, when they go globally, can change the world. And this is something we really want to facilitate. We have a view on the world, which is, I'm sure everybody here knows the Black Swan theory, which is a theory that it's impossible to predict big events that will change things dramatically because of the nature of their unpredictability. We think it's the case. I believe that this is an accurate theory. I also think that even though we live in a global world, because these ecosystems are still very local, when a black swan event appears in the local ecosystems, it takes a lot of time for it to become global. And we're trying to make that more obvious, and we're trying to make sure that any black swan event that appears in an ecosystem like China or South Korea now is something that everybody sees, so that if it has the potential to change the world, then we'll make sure that people who could help that happen will see it and then act on it. So think of it of cross-border investments, for example. If you are Chinese startups and you're having a lot of success, you're doing something which is disrupting the world and have the potential to do that globally, then it's good if international investors see you and consider investing in you to help you go global. And that's something we really want to facilitate. I think we're at the very beginning of that, and we're very excited to do that. So I think that's all I want to say. Very keen to have a discussion. Maybe before that, I will just show you very, very quickly what our search engine looks like, so you get an idea of the product that we have, which for a lot of part is actually free, so you can use it whenever you want. So let me try and actually do that. I should be able to share my screen. Yes, so if I do this, then now you should see my screen. Do you guys see it? I actually don't know if anybody can answer, but I'm feeling very like talking to myself right now. Okay, cool. So I understand you guys are seeing the screen. Awesome. So that I'm seeing a lot of stuff. Okay, cool. So that's our search engine. So this is the English version. You can have it in Korean if you want, or in Chinese. All work the same, and you can search in the language that you want. Whenever you see a lock like that, it means that it's behind a paywall. So you would have to be a paid user. So we have a subscription model to access these things. And actually, let me just change these very quickly. So great. So what you see here is, so you have in the middle here, the search bar. So you can see that by default, you can search keyword. So some of them are appearing here. So you can search AI, fintech, whatever you want. You can search by companies. So ByteDance, DD, whatever you want to see, or investors. So if you want to know what are the companies that Sequoia is investing in, for example, or Gen Fund, then you can just type in the name and you're going to see the portfolio of these investors. And these are the most popular searches that we find people do on our search engine. So if I click on the unicorns, for example, then what you get is very much like a search engine. So on the top here, you have a list of filters. So you see we find 588 companies that are answers the unicorn search here. All of them are listed here. And if you were to want to filter or restrain that search, you could do that using those filters by how much they've raised, when they've been incorporated, when they've raised their last investments. Or you can just go on the map here. And I don't know, for example, I talked about South Korea. So I can just look at the ones in South Korea. And so then you get the list of these companies, you know, which investors have been investing in these companies. If you're a paid user, you can download this information. This is in number of investments, not in the amount. And then here you have the amount invested at each round for the companies in your list. We can actually just look at all of them, maybe it'd be more interesting. And then you see that you'll get the same result for the companies that now you have on the left. So much bigger numbers. And then you can click on any of those, and then you're gonna get a profile for this company. So usually we give you a screenshot of their website. If you click on it, then you get access directly to their website, so you can do your own search. You have a description that tells you what the company is doing, key information on, you know, overview who's the CEO, when they were funded, how much they've raised, latest valuation, contact information if you want that. And then these keywords are basically a way for you to look at the competition. So something we really believe in is similar companies do not really exist as a whole. And if you really want to look at similar companies, you have to look at that in the context of specific expertise, because now companies are doing different things. And that means that if you want to look at competition, then you want to look at that through very specific expertise. So in this context, you have all of those ones. And so if you want to look at, I don't know, real estate digitalization, then what happens is you stay on the company, but then we refresh the list of companies on the left, and then you can look at all of them. And the color here is a function of how well they rank on our ranking, which I described earlier. Then we give you data on their fundraising. So what we do is we try to, the same way we're trying to contextualize, as I said, things between countries, we're actually also doing that within the ecosystem. So that means that this company, we classify it as a real estate and property company. And of course, there's many other companies in China doing that. You see the numbers on the left. And so what we do is for each round of investment, we actually give you a box plot of what other companies have raised. That means that the blue area here represents how much half of the companies have raised. So you can see that this company has raised much more than the other ones. So the green points is how much they've raised. When we don't have the information, it's not public, we just estimate it based on everything that we can find. And that gives you an idea on how well this company is doing as compared to the industry. And here you see it's kind of obvious that they're raising a lot more money. And if you want the details of their fundraising, you have it. So you have all the investors per round, when it happened. And as I said before, you can click on any of those investors and look at their portfolio. Either filter your existing search or look at the entire portfolio of the company. And then we have information on the news. You can look at all the news published on this company in the original language, so here in Chinese, or translated in English. My newsletters, if you're interested into looking at those who are linked to the company, you can do that here. And then a box plot which tells you what kind of words company use to describe themselves in this industry. So I don't want to go more into that because that's not the topic, but I just wanted to show you what we're doing and what our product looked like. Of course, this is the public search engine, which has limitations. Like, for example, as you can see, you can search by specific keywords, companies or investors, but you cannot type in everything you want all the time. That's because we also have offers for bespoke products. So we've worked with companies in the past who want to have a search which is very specific on, I don't know, like vegan products in China, which are related to, milk. Then we can build specific algorithms, like fine-tune our algorithms for them so that they get results which are exactly what they're looking for, with a bit more granularity than what you find on a public search engine. But in terms of what you can find, without this idea of like searching very, very precisely, the search engine can find, I think, almost all the companies in China right now, and very soon in South Korea too. So I think that's all I wanted to say. And yeah, I mean, I'd be very happy to chat. So if anybody has any question, then I'll be happy to talk. If I'm not alone, which I hope I'm not. I don't know if I'm missing something, or are you guys still hearing me? Anybody has any questions? I'm
Hi,
sure I've said
Jordan.
things. Hey, hi.
We all can hear you very well. It's a very interesting presentation. I think
Awesome.
all the questions are in the Q&A box in the chat. You can have a look.
Sorry. Oh yeah, because I was sharing my screen, so I didn't have the chat. Okay, cool. So let me go through. Could you please talk about your fundraising experience and how you valorize your company? Thanks. Well, that's actually a very good question. So I'm going to take them one by one, by the way. I don't know if that's the right way, but that's a very good question, because we went through, so when we started the company, we thought about raising through VCs, and we went through the exercise of pitching our company to those VCs, and we didn't really like the experience, because maybe it's too early, I don't know, but I found that VCs, especially it was in Europe, so it's probably a bit different, but even though they're trying to invest in new companies or new technologies or new ideas, at the end of the day, they have very specific criterias, and if you don't fall within the boxes, then it's very difficult for them to make sense of what you're doing. So as I said at the very beginning, we were kind of in between a tech company and also helping companies with clients with bespoke products. So that meant that they tried to see us as a SaaS model, which at the time didn't really exist. And they weren't happy with the idea of looking like a consulting firm. And so they were trying to put us in one of those boxes, and the discussions were not something that we really enjoyed. And we think that bringing investors in a company means having shareholders of that company, which is your company. And bringing shareholders is something which we take very seriously. We're not, we're very careful about who joins the company. So in terms of shareholders. So what happened is we ended up only raising through what you could call business angels. So people who we really created a good relationship with, and who we thought were buying into our idea and willing to help us become what we want to become, while leaving us the freedom to do whatever we want with it. Because when you're building a company like ours, which is something which is cross-border, looking at countries which are often not very well understood by people everywhere, because you're across these cultures, it's important that you can do what you want, because you'll have to make choices which sometimes will be difficult, strong choices, and they need to make sense for you, because the future of your company relies on the choices that you make. So fundraising wise, we ended up, we actually raised twice. And each time we raised through business angels, people we really valued and we wanted to be part of our story. In terms of the valuation, it's also a very good question, because you can think of the valuation as like, do you want it to be the highest, or there's a balance, right? Because if it's too high, then it creates a pressure on you, which is something that doesn't often make sense. But if it's too low, then you're giving away too much of your company. So for us, we just found the right balance between the people we wanted to bring in and how much we wanted to raise. The reality is, because we had clients early on, we weren't in need of money as a life or death situation. So we had the ability to just choose basically people for who they were and not for the money. So that's how we went about it. And I to this day, I'm very happy with the choices that we made. And I think we're very proud of our shareholders. We're very happy with them, and they trust us and we trust them. And I think that gives you a freedom and a peace of mind, which is very important when you go through all that you have to go through creating a company. This is interesting. What I want to know is, how did you get all the information that you put in the system? So again, very good question. So the way we do that is basically information comes from many different sources. As I said, everything that we do is done in Chinese for China. So we're reading basically news websites, investors' websites, companies' website. We build crawlers. So they're small programs that are able to read websites and extract the relevant piece of information from it. And then what we do is we use that, we curate it, and we index it. So for a search engine to be able to work, you need to index the information that you have. So actually, even Google or Baidu, they don't have like live information. Often what they have is their websites. They read through them, they look at everything, they give them a score, they index them based on specific criteria, and then when you search, you get that result. And sometimes you find that it's not always up to date in terms of how you find them. That's because of the indexation process. So we have the same system, which is we take all this information, we extract it, we, I would say, structure it in a way that works for us. We then index it so that you can search it, and then you see that as you see it on the website. We do this process every day. So every day the information is updated. And so we basically read websites that you can think of, like any news that you read in Chinese, we probably are reading them automatically. This is Jason from Paris. Oh, cool. Great to see you. How do you see the influence of Chinese tech ecosystem from ongoing tensions against the US and India? How will it affect us? That's a very difficult question. We've been thinking about this a lot. So actually, because there's no answer to that, there's no right answer. I can only tell you what I think. What I think is, if you look at what's happening in the world of tech right now, you find that tech companies are more powerful than ever. So a good example is, actually, let's take a non-Chinese example to avoid that. In the first instance, take SpaceX, so Elon Musk. If you look at the positioning of Elon Musk right now, it is almost as powerful as what the state could be. And that's because of the company that he created. So because he's creating so much value with so much energy, he has a say in questions that were before only for the government. Now, a lot of tech companies are going that route, and they get a lot of power because of what they do. And often what happens is you have a fight between different worlds, because if a company is successful, it's because it's basically shaking a bit the status quo. So they're usually trying to do something which is not something that is already existing and that people would be, we thought would make sense to create. And I think that means that it's changing a bit how politics work, because I think that today, in many cases, actually, as a citizen in a country or as a user, your actions count a lot in pushing and changing things. For example, if you were in Europe when Uber arrived, just riding an Uber instead of riding a taxi was almost a political move. So that means that these companies who are now becoming very successful and very big are very close to having an impact on politics. And the reality is right now, so politics is country-based. So each country has its own view of the world and usually is trying to keep that as a safe thing. Now, companies are naturally international, which creates questions around, are they linked to the government, which means that are they doing what they they think should be done and what the world needs to look like, or are they actually working with a state mindset which would have a different agenda? And I think this is creating tensions because countries are seeing the world through their own angle. If you remember what I said about looking at the world from different angles, by construction, a country only looks through one angle, which means that if you are the US and you look at the ball from that angle, and then you are China and you look at the ball from that angle, then if you're not willing to really try and understand each other, then it's going to create tensions, which end up being caught in these companies who are across borders. And India is the same. So I think it's a very big question. It's something that is going to evolve. I actually wonder how it's going to evolve. I wonder where the world is going in terms of to which extent this idea of being cross-border is going to be winning against localized politics. I've seen in the US, for example, people, I don't know, maybe you know Y Combinator. So Sam Altman, who is the head of that incubator, which has a good reputation. I heard him say he was thinking of going into politics. And he can do that because of the power he's gained from pushing these startups. And so what happens when someone like that then gets into the other world, which is the world of politics? Will it change the way countries interact? So I think it's a very difficult question. We need to just wait and see. We need to be actors. I think we need to, do what we think is right. And I don't think it's the end of cross-border transactions or development. I think it's just something that's going to have to be taken into account, and we need to see how it's going to be played. But I definitely don't think it's the end of it. I think it's just a sign that cross-border is becoming a bigger thing, and therefore the world is trying to figure out how to deal with it. But I think it's just the beginning, is what I think. What type? It's weird because I answer questions, but I don't know if you guys have things to say. So I just, but I'll keep going. What type of clients are you attracting now? Mostly Chinese, English, or Korean? That's also a very good question. So so we have all of those. We have clients which are in each of these countries. Mainly, we were targeting English-speaking clients. So there would be international companies, but we often have Chinese people within them, but also a lot of English speakers who would not speak Chinese and therefore like the idea of being able to work with Chinese and English, and therefore that would ease how they work together. Korean is a very interesting question because I'm guessing most of you are either based in China or are very aware of the Chinese market. So China is a very mature ecosystem in terms of startups. There are already a lot of existing players, Chinese ones, which we think we're at the same reliability level in terms of what we can find. But people it's a country that is understand its ecosystem very well. In South Korea, it's still a newer ecosystem in terms of the innovation, which means that locally, people don't really have the tools yet to really understand what is happening. So they're very keen to use our product locally. So that means that not only they use it to try and understand China, which is an important part of what they will do with our technology, but also now they're really, really keen to try and understand their own ecosystem. And I've published on social media some examples of mapping we did on Korean startups. And I've been, local VCs and local people here wanted to talk to me to try and see like what we could really provide and how it worked, because they're really interested into understanding it. So we have all of those clients. It's changing. Also, the type of clients that we have is also moving a lot. We even have now students using our website to try and find interesting internships in the most promising companies across borders, because they want to travel the world and find a cool job. So we have a lot of different type of people using our products, and we're very keen to see how that's going to develop, because we don't know, and we'll figure it out as we go. What are your revenue streams and roadmap or growth? What's the differentiation of your search engine compared to Crunchbase, etc.? So, well, that's a good question. So revenue streams, we basically have, so I mean, I don't know if it's a revenue stream, but we've been lucky to win a big competition, which means that we've received money from that in South Korea, particularly. We have the search engine, which is, so it's £500 a month. So that's a revenue stream. It's a SaaS model, basically. And then we have bespoke case by case, I would say, projects or clients that we serve, for which we build maybe like a bespoke dashboard that they will use to have maybe a ranking that is a bit different, so that includes their investment strategy in their fund, which is a bit different from what the average is. Basically, people who want specific products, and that's something that's, of course, more expensive, and it's another revenue stream. So right now, these are the revenue streams that we have. In terms of how we compare with Crunchbase or other people, so there's many ways. So first of all, we're a search engine more than a database, which means that you can search for keywords without knowing what you're really looking for, and find companies through this algorithm we built, which is, I believe, unique. And you'll see companies that you didn't expect. Many VCs would search, even though they know fintech, for example, they will go on a website, search fintech, and find companies they might not have known in the past because of the way it's built. So that's a big difference. And the other big difference is Crunchbase is Crunchbase says that they do the world, but they're basically relying on people inputting their data on the database, and then just making that available. And so it's English based, so only people who want to do it in English will do it. Of course, they have people who put the biggest companies, but basically it's English based, which means that they have a lot of blind spots, especially in China. So if you search Chinese AI companies, and you go on Crunchbase, and then you do the same on our search engine, you'll see the difference is huge. The number of companies we find is just nowhere near what they find. And same for South Korea. So as I said at the very beginning, basically, we really, really believe that before you can go global, you need to go local. So, if you think about it, like I've been here for a year in South Korea, and we will only release what we've done, I think in September. And I'm going to stay here to keep making sure I fully understand the ecosystem. This is something that is unique to us, which is that we really want to understand local ecosystem to a point where we feel comfortable with our understanding of it and the data we can provide, which I think Crunchbase is more just trying to have everything in there so that people feel like they see the world, where in reality, they only see the US and through the eyes of whoever is inputting the data. So if you go on Crunchbase, you'll find an R2, for example, but this is something that we did at the very beginning of the company. We've never updated it. I don't think they have the algorithms behind to update that automatically. So I'm pretty sure that the data on our company is outdated completely because of that process, because we don't feel the need to just go and update it ourselves. So that's a big difference, because we do that automatically. We rely on public data, which means, of course, we're not like, we would need to talk to all the companies in the world to be able to make sure that we always are on the same page. But I think what we do is probably the best way we can to be as up to date as possible on all of these companies. Could you please tell us more about your services for enterprise users, such as tailor-made algorithms? Thank you. Yeah, I mean, actually, let me see if I have around something that I could actually show you. Let me see. Maybe that's the best way for me to show you that. So yeah, I have, let me see if that works. It does work. Okay, so I will try and show you that quickly, just to give you an example of something we've done that will answer your question. Boom. Okay, so now you should see a presentation. So can I go in? Yeah. So that's so what I said around searching. So the search engine allows you to only search for keywords and not anything you want. So there's a lot of keywords because we index them automatically. So there's a lot of them. But so if you search rice, I'm sure you're going to find something. But if you really want to be super precise, which is what corporates usually want, you cannot really do that on the website. So what we do is, this is an example of a custom bespoke product we've made for someone where they had a very specific request in terms of what they wanted to find. And so that's just going to show you very quickly what it looks like. So what we did in this case is we took like a lot of websites, so 22 million. And then we created a model where we looked at all the words and how they connect to each other in terms of their frequency, in order to be able to create a map which was close to the word that they were looking for. So in this case, it was the example is plant-based. And then what you get is, related to that word, you have a lot of other ones. So, you know, like vegan, gluten-free, kefir, vitamins, natural ingredients. So these are all words that are related to this one that you want to input. And then what we do is, using all of those links to those words, we go through all the companies we have, and we're able to find a certain number of them. So here is the number of companies found per keyword specifically. And then we're able to therefore map very precisely companies, which are Chinese companies. In this case, it was for a client who was interested in China, and give them a list of companies, which is extremely specific to the search that they made based on an algorithm like that. So that's something we've done. Something else we've done is using, so we have a lot of investment data because of what we're building. That means that you can actually look at specific investors that you know are very active in maybe early stage or whatever you want to look at, and then figure out what kind of technology these companies have. And therefore you can then look at the companies that receive money from specific investors and what they're doing, which might give you an understanding of what the future might look like. So for example, if I take a US example to go sideways, then think of Y Combinator. So if you look at Y Combinator and you look at the kind of companies that they take in, it's going to give you maybe an idea of what they think the future might need to look like or could look like. And that's something that companies will want to know. So, you know, if you were to think about what kind of technologies will exist in 5 years, there's, of course, you can do a macro analysis, but a macro analysis is only as good as what people think, because it's just macro. But if you do that from the bottom up and you look at today, what companies are receiving money at a very early stage, then you get a good feel for which companies will exist in 5 years, or at least you can try and predict or try and have a view. So yeah, so that's also something we've done. This is another example, which probably won't go into details, but basically the idea is to look at a specific industry and who is investing at which stage on what kind of technology, and dive in. So go from the bottom up, like each company and each investment they've received, and then go up to have like a macro view of what that means without having the macro analysis. So from the details, you can go up to having something which is more macro. So yeah, that's two examples of things we did in the past. Wait, is that the, yeah, that was the last question. All right, so I don't know if there's any more question, but it's been a bit interesting to talk just me. Thank you for all of you who are asking questions. Very keen to keep the discussion going. So if you guys want to reach out, talk, or you know, just like catch up, very, very happy to do so. I am in the group, the WeChat group, so very easy to find. And I guess thank you for having me and letting me speak for so long. And I wish I would know about all of you guys, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jordan, for this valuable sharing. It was really, really very inspiring, at least for me. I think also for the most of the people attending this session. Thank you very much for having accepted our invitation. So if there's no more question, we'll call it for end, but it's never end actually, because we have one WeChat group. So we'll continue to catch up. And as Jordan said, at HEC, we had a big project in Shenzhen area to build up a kind of incubator, accelerator, innovative hub. If you're interested, you may PM me or more my colleague to get more information, but we really hope to have all your support to this.
I'm not hearing you anymore. I don't know if it's just me or.
Hello? Hello?
Oh, okay, you're back. Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Okay, so thank you very much. I don't know if you have heard me about our big project initiative in Shenzhen. And if you are interested in getting more information, please just contact me or my colleague. And thank you, Jordan, for this sharing. Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight's coffee talk. And we'll see you on the 26th of August after a short summer break. And wish you all a very good evening and a nice summer. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.